Hi, I'm Jess. I'm on the way to work. Got a question this morning. Where do you buy houses? It's been asked by 4, 5, 6 different people. What's your favourite place to buy a house? Where do you invest? So I'll do my best to answer that. I'm also going to do two things, because actually I'm just on the way to work. I've got to pop into a property and have a look at it. I've been tasked. It's holiday season, and I've been roped into doing some real work. So I'm going to do that. And it struck me, I've never on one of these videos gone into a house and shown you guys what we buy. We run a discovery day 2-3 times a month where people come up to our business and they look around, they see what we do, and we take them out to see a house. We get in a minibus and go and see a house that's finished, a house that's in renovation. When we do a survey at the end of the day, what's the thing that you enjoyed about the day the most? More often than not, people say they like seeing the house. So hey ho, we're always a bit puzzled, the highlight of the whole day is going to stand in a slightly smelly 2 or 3 bed terraced house, then so be it. So I'll show you one of those. So at the end of this video, I'll pop out and we'll go have a look at it. So where do we buy properties? First thing, I bought properties in different areas at different times. So I built most of my portfolio in Northampton in the first sort of 5, 6, 7 years. I couldn't do that now. The property prices there are more expensive. To put it in context, when I started buying in Nottingham from Northampton. So I was buying in Northampton, then when I started buying in Nottingham, a house would have been £120,000 and the rent would have been £500. In Nottingham, a house would have been £60,000 and the rent would have still been the same, £500. So it changes. We just can't buy in Northampton anymore. We're buying in Nottingham. There have been quite a number of changes in the mortgage market over the last 4, 5, 6 years, but particularly in the last 2, and there's another tightening up that's just happening just now as well. So things have got a lot tighter, and one of the things we've noticed is if you're going to finance, and not all of our clients use mortgages, but the vast majority do, a deal's got to stack. It always should have stacked, of course, but now a bank will not lend on it unless it will, and more to the point, your whole portfolio's got to stack. Otherwise, they take everything into account. If 1 or 2 are underperforming, that will hold back the lending on subsequent properties you want to put into that portfolio. So now more than ever, it's absolutely imperative that you're buying the right kind of properties in the right kind of areas. For us, it's always come naturally, actually. So all these changes in the mortgage market haven't really affected us at all, because we've been buying the right kind of houses anyway. So it really hasn't made much difference at all, which I suppose is good news. We buy in a couple of different areas is the answer. I'm not from Nottingham myself. My wife's from down Northamptonshire, that's why we're down there. My parents live up north, so I'm a bit of a mongrel from all over the place. I chose to stay in Nottingham because that's where I could buy properties. We are gradually moving on. I'm in Nottingham right now. The house I'm going to go show you at the moment is in Nottingham, so I'll get out and I'll show you around in that house. It's in Nottingham. It works. It's probably at the top end of where it works. So if I explain our rationale, well, first of all, we look at a map and we say, where wouldn't we buy? That's the number one thing. So you cross off all those areas. In Nottingham, there's actually not that many areas. People would it's a big metropolitan city. It's got some areas where they have their antisocial problems and those kind of things. We don't buy in those areas, but actually they're very few and far between. So you get that off your list, but they're the places we don't buy at any price. There are houses and flats in Nottingham that are very, very cheap. £25,000, £30,000 perhaps. I would not buy those properties. They're not cheap. They're, it's more hassle than you're worth. For me, it doesn't feel cheap because it might look like a good yield, but you've got to go around there and collect the rent. That's the thing that I always remember. So we don't buy in those areas. And then if you will sell us a house for, I don't know, 50, 60, 70,000 pounds, that we can spend 10 to 15,000 pounds doing up, and at the end of it, it'll be worth 100, 120,000 pounds, something around those. That'd be really rough figures. we'll buy it. Simple as that. We throw in a few things on top of that, like it's got to be in the right area, bus routes, and you've got to be able to rent the thing for the right money and all those kind of things. Is it accessible? Are the shops close by? Are the schools close by? What's the access like? But honestly, in most of the places where we're looking, if somebody has gone to the trouble of building a 3-bedroom house in a city like this, it's going to have pretty good access. All those boxes are going to be ticked. So yeah, it's a consideration for sure, but it's an easy one for us. We're here, and most of those things are ticked. So that's where we buy. I chose to settle down in Nottingham and buy here because you could just find it. Now we've noticed something happening where, as time goes on, I'll put it this way: I have never bought a house for £50,000 or £60,000 that has not, within I want to say 4, but let's say 5 just to be safe, 5 years, doubled in value. There's a question we get asked a lot, and that is, yeah, but do these cheap houses, will they actually go up in value? Because they're just a cheap house, aren't they? A cheap house will go up in value quicker than a more expensive house. If you think about it, I don't know what percentage of the UK's population can afford to live in a £60,000 house, but I would say it's a high number, maybe 80s, 90s, I don't know. If that house value doubled, so it's not a £50,000 or £60,000 house now, it's a £100,000 or £120,000 house, how many of those people can't now afford to live there? I would say not many. Most people, we've got a national minimum wage in this country. If you can afford to live in a house, it doesn't really matter if your mortgage is, and I'm thinking, would the mortgage be £150 or £180 a month on those two different houses? I don't know. You have to put a bigger deposit down for sure, but they are affordable amounts of money. So it really doesn't make much difference whether the house is 60 grand or 120 grand for somebody being able to buy it. I know that's very dismissive, and of course it does make a difference, but still a vast majority of people can afford to live in those houses. Think of a £400,000 house. How quickly can that go to a £800,000 house? There's a lot of things stopping that happening. Not least of which, almost everybody in the country, and I'm talking probably, I have seen stats on these. I can't remember exactly, but it's going to be in the 90%. Can't afford to live there. So that small band is massively significant. We have seen these houses, these 50, 60 grand houses, go up in value like that, and it just keeps happening and happening. So the answer to the question is, we keep chasing where those houses are. Another part of the answer to the same question. With these new mortgage rules, and it's always been our knowledge, we've always invested to these, but it's been brought home absolutely with these new mortgage rules. You can't really buy a house that stacks and works if the end value of it is much over, let's say, what, 125, 135,000 pounds. There's not many places in the country where you can buy a house for 125 or 135,000 pounds that will rent out enough to give you the loan back to make it all stack. So you kind of run out of steam at an end value of 125. What we're finding is, and I've driven past it on purpose, you'll see me turning around in a minute. I don't want people to think, he doesn't even know where his own houses are, he's just driven past. I want to park on the other side of the street. Yeah, so what we found is happening is, we find an area, we can buy a house for 50, 60, 70,000 pounds. I'm in one of those areas right now. I'm in an area where it was. We buy them, and they gradually go up in value over the course of 2, 3, 4 years perhaps. The house I'm going to go into now, we bought for 80 odd thousand pounds. We spent 15 and a bit thousand pounds on it. It's going to be worth about 120 odd. I know they're all really rough figures. I actually own this house as well, so I should know the figures a bit better than that, but I don't. So 4 years ago, I'd have wanted to pay 60 grand for this house, maybe a little bit less. And that's what's happened. It's still a deal as it is now. It still stacks up. So I bought it. I've renovated it, and we're going to rent it out. We're always looking in that window of 6 months, 7, 8, 9 months, where we buy it, we do the work, and we strip our funds back out of it to go back and do another deal. It doesn't really matter what we're paying for it, as long as we're on the curve in the right way. So there's that to take into account. But we know that this area is kind of running out of steam. Probably the other way to put it is getting overheated. It's coming up, and these houses now are worth more than we can pay. I don't think we'll be able to buy here much longer. So we are finding new areas, and we've done that consistently over the last 2-3 years. We're gradually moving on. It's generally moving north, and we're buying 3 or 4 different areas to where we're buying. That's the way it generally works. So I'll get out. I'll show you around this one. So we're let's go back over the other side of the road. It's that house there, and just a 2-bed terrace house. I just checked myself, it is 2 bed. It's been a while since I've been in here, so I don't know how the builders are getting on. They're not expecting me, so one of the jobs we're doing here is taking all of this frontage out. So we've got off-street parking. You'll see this house here is done exactly the same next door. I wasn't 100% convinced, and then I realised not only does it give you an extra car parking space, which obviously then you are losing another car parking space on the road, but you can now park 2 cars. Somebody can park their car there, another car on the road. Obviously they'll block themselves in, but it does also mean that nobody parks in front of your, so I just have there, but nobody should park in front of your driveway, of course, because it's got a dropped curve. So we're doing that. We think that adds about, optimistically, £10,000 to the value of the property, but realistically, I don't know if it'll get down to maybe 7 or something like that. So there we go, let's have a little look around. So this has all been replastered downstairs, so it needs a damp-proof course. That's our standard kitchen that we put in. Decent enough quality. Not got blue edges, that's like a protective bit. Sink, oven, hob, there's an extractor goes there, it gets vented out. This particular one's got quite a nice big long garden as well. They don't always have them. That's the plan for the kitchen. Simple one, each job has a kitchen plan. Always put tiles down on the floor there as well. One of the things to note is we don't spend too much money on these, it's all the same woodwork. This here, I don't know if you can see it, but that's wallpaper, it's just been painted over the top of. One of the nice things when people come see us is just calibrating the kind of house that we buy. This is where it works. So when people say, what kind of areas do you buy and where do you buy? I think most people understand that they shouldn't buy a house that they'd like to live in themselves, but I don't think they've got the calibration quite right, where they think they basically don't drop it down enough pegs. This is the absolute ideal area. You look at it, it's not. I personally wouldn't aspire to live here, but I also wouldn't be bothered if I had to live here. I'm not going to be worried about parking my car outside or taking my kids to school or whatever. It's a decent area. It doesn't feel oppressive in any way. And it's just a cheap house. So going through into the kitchen. That's a kitchen bathroom. It's an interesting one. So horrible art text on the wall. We're not taking it off. We just painted over the top of it. It won't affect the value and it won't affect the rentability. So we've just left it. So, in answer to your question, where do we buy? Where do we like to buy? It's houses like this. Come on to one of our Discover Days and you can get the personal guided tour. Look forward to seeing you.